Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka, and it's June 15, 2021. You're on the great show called I'm Probably Wrong About Everything with Rob Grant. But indeed, we're flipping the couch today. We're like turning the sofa over and seeing what comes out. And Marshall McLuhan, who's a Canadian just like Rob, said, carefully make plans, then do the opposite. So I'm appearing on Rob's show, not as a guest, but as the host. So I'm going to interview Rob. Thanks for being here, Rob.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me on your own show. You know how I would try to weasel all these great podcasters to having me interview them on their show. It's like, hey, wait a minute. But you are willing, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to know you for a while now, Rob. What's the best thing for a human being?
Connection.
It's a good word. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Conversation.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
To make sense of the world around them.
Yeah. And do you think this need or want to make sense, to gather information, is more innate in humans or more invented by humans?
I think it's a marriage between the two. I mean, there's a thirst for understanding, and that thirst can become kind of insatiable. And it's like, once you start something, you want more of it. It's like, you make $10 million, which I've never made. Do you stop there? I mean, once you begin your pursuit of knowledge, do you stop there? Can you ever know everything? So I think that there is an innate desire to acquire things, to again, make sense of the world, that makes it part of our it's nature and it's nurture, right?
Yeah.
And that they're married together.
Why do you think humans invented language?
Well, I just started reading the speech book as well, and
by Simon Prentice.
Right, yes, by Simon Prentice, who I'm having on tomorrow. Thanks to you.
Great.
But language, animals do communicate, because in his book he's saying that we've developed such an evolved form of communication that has almost created the limitations of language. So I think the question is why did we invent
language?
I think it started as a means of survival.
Yeah.
I think it started as a means of survival, and then it evolved. I mean, still to this day, part of survival is our ability to communicate with the world around us.
Yeah. Yeah. Lily Tomlin said we invented language to complain. So she's a, with her partner, Jane Wagner, are comedians. They're satirizing it. And I was told that if you complain and or gossip, you live longer because you're getting it out of your system. Now, a lot of people don't want to hear people complain and whine all the time. We want to develop what's called critical thinking. What's the difference between critical thinking and complaining?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that critical thinking is our ability to, I mean, really, critical thinking is quite a fascinating thing, because I was thinking about it today, but what we don't understand, we don't know. And by us seeking to understand, that's using our critical thinking, and us to sort of make sense of others, because there's this balance between the individual and the collective, but the individual wouldn't exist without the collective. So I think that if we complain, it's just sort of like, well, there's a famous saying my dad used to say, but it's like, can't complain, nobody would listen. And it's this idea of we all have complaints, we all have grievances, but sometimes the practice of gratitude is what can help us to just make sense of our place in the world.
I love you keep going to sense. It's an important word. Suss out what your dad exactly meant. I can't complain, no one will listen. What does that mean?
Well, my father was a very hardworking individual, and he was quite well off. He had all the toys. He had all the utilities that I guess would be demonstrated of, like, what do you have to complain about? You have a house, you have food, you have, a wonderful family, right? You check all the boxes. So therefore you have nothing to complain about, I think, in the grand scheme of things.
I see. And did humans, is thinking more innate or more invented?
Is it Benjamin Skinner and he was the behavioralist? He studied
B.F. Skinner,
behavioralism. B.F. Skinner,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think we do learn a lot by looking at the world around us, looking at nature. And I think that there's this, again, thinking, I think it's an evolution. Like there's so many things that are married together. I mean, as we're able to express ourselves, so came the ability to tell stories. And our ability to tell stories allowed us to engineer things over time. I mean, to kind of carry on our learned habits, right? We don't have to keep, we're able to kind of build things on it. I mean, I could look up anything on YouTube and teach myself how to do it. So I think that thinking, again, it's a mixture of both.
Both, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So do you think your observations of humans in general, are humans more thinking beings or more feeling beings? I know it's both and it depends, but just in general, how do you process that?
I wonder if through time it changes, because I think right now at this moment in history, I think that we appeal to our feelings much more than our critical thinking. It seems that we're easily offended these days, and we can sometimes use that to almost weaponize the conversation in, like, oh, that hurts my feelings. And then that's the end of it. And I think we have to have the courage to go beyond that, to say, you know what, that does hurt my feelings, but why? Am I using my feelings as a defense mechanism to keep myself from what I need to do? I had a conversation today about a student who, an insecurity that he has is his body, and he always wears a sweater. And I said, well, what happens if you just wear your shirt? He's like, well, people might say things, but what happens when people ask you why you have your sweater on and it's the middle of June? He says, well, I tell them I have body image issues. So I'm like, well, you already told them. So it was his and mine. I like to kind of go for, oh, that hurts my feelings. But I have to use those critical thinking skills to get beyond that. Because
you have to, as a counselor, you meant?
Well, just in general, I think.
In
right?
general, not just in, because that's interesting. It's almost the flip of what I was taught by a social worker. He said, don't tell people what to do. Like, don't do that or don't do that. He said, when you do that, I feel sad. Tell them your feelings. Don't tell them what to do.
Right.
Not or say. So that's interesting. Do thoughts create emotions?
Yes. Yes. I mean, you think about, if I was to sit here and think about all the things that I don't have, I would start to feel, sad, unfulfilled, right? despair. But then if I started to think about all the wonderful things that I have,
Yeah.
I would feel optimistic. I would feel hopeful.
Yeah. Rob, do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning.
Yeah.
Although happiness is great. I mean, who wouldn't want to sip a Mai Tai and listen to Jimmy Buffett in Hawaii, right? On a yacht. Who wouldn't want to do that?
Well,
But
that's a good example. But if we shared a drink together and good music, both of those would end. But the time we spent together sharing each other's company and conversation might last our entire lifetime. So the meaning lasts, happiness doesn't necessarily last. At least that's where I got the root of that question, was from Viktor Frankl's book Man's Search for Meaning. So there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. So you're doing good.
yes, but I think in life, I mean, one of my philosophies is the importance of balance, and I sometimes really do worry about our future and our inability to create balance within our lives, within our society.
Yeah.
Well, which is why I started this project.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that more. I mean, that's basically there's two ends of a spectrum. And Pascal, the mathematician and philosopher, says in order to understand anything, you have to understand this end and that end and everything in between. So it's the full spectrum. It's called comprehensive awareness. If you study the patterns, you'll get a big picture view. So, but if you stay balanced and you don't ever go to one further extreme or one other, so it really is it's jujitsu, judo, it's that push and pull. So I think you're doing it good. All the times I've had with you have a great sense of what McLuhan said. Understanding is not having a point of view. Most people think, well, no, I love podcasts or I hate them, or I love Facebook or I hate it. No, it's how does it change? How does it shape our behavior? You can personally have a point of view, but when you're with one or more people, it's probably better, which is a stupid word, but it's maybe enabling you to get a bigger picture. If you don't say, I like this or I dislike this, you're trying to say, well, how is it shaping us? So, does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're like, we're just detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
What's so funny is how we answer questions like these. Like when I say, I think, almost that's the answer in and of itself. But
well, you know that from attending our
that's true. Yes.
People go, I goes, that's a great answer. Your first intuition, your first impulse. Allen Ginsberg, great beat poet, said, first thought, best thought. Now, it doesn't mean you can't suss it out now. Go ahead and suss it out. But it is, yeah.
Well, I do think that there is a marriage again between the two, and I love talking about what comes after death. I mean, death is something that I like to say that I live, man. Boy, do I live, and I love deeply. And when people move on, I mean, it's very difficult for me, and my life has been, there's been a lot of death throughout my life. And I sometimes think, like, when we go, what does happen, and which is where consciousness plays a role into it. I mean, we discussed before that as soon as you die, 0.5 you lose 0.5 of a pound. Like, but what is that? Is that your essence? Is that your consciousness? What is that? And I think
physical weight of your body.
Yeah, half a pound leaves your body, or so I've heard. I can't cite who that is.
Of course, yeah.
But I think that consciousness has come from something, you know.
Yeah.
And but I do think that we progress it through
Yeah.
speech, dialogue, conversation.
We progress it. That's good. You took the progress as a noun and you made it a verb. This is really important. American Indians, indigenous people, they are Navajo, Shenandoah. They have no nouns. They only have verbs. See, nouns go, this is the way it is. Verbs are like forever changing. In fact, Bucky Fuller, who's a modern thinker you have to study, he said his book is called I Seem to Be a Verb.
Bucky Fuller?
Said it, Bucky Fuller. Oh, Bucky's the best. Yeah, he invented the geodesic dome, and he would talk for 8 hours and everybody would clap, so he'd talk for another 8 hours. No, he's very, very important. One of the most important things he said is all crew, no passengers. Everybody's crew. We're all crew, no passengers. You know, everybody's involved.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like history. It's a study of history and how it's like you can't be biased in history. And it's like, well, that's bullshit. Why are you doing this in the first place? Everybody has bias. But that should be something that we identify and embrace. Like, listen, I'm studying English history because my grandmother was English. You know what I mean? Like, we all have I liken to believe that we all have a reason why for what it is that we do.
Right. And that's back to bias has services and disservices.
Absolutely.
How you suss it out, you know, like hate. Is hating good or bad? Well, we don't want to hate, but there is part of that to go back. You're a discerning human. You're saying, you know, I don't prefer this action. You know, when I say I hate a certain music group, it's not that I hate it. They go, that's a strong word. Or like, you know, before COVID, I was doing a year-long research project on motorized scooters, you know, birds and those. They're all over our town. And, you know, today I just saw some Hollywood star got killed by a motorized scooter. And, you know,
like they were hit by a motorized scooter?
Yeah. And you know, it's bound to happen, and it's going to happen no matter what. People are going to get killed by everything. So I was studying and I would say, so what's your take on you know, what do you call them? Scooters, motorized scooters. And people go, I hate them, you know. And I mean, it was like, dude, you know, what you're doing is you're not dealing with the fact that they're going to be everywhere, blocking every sidewalk from this point on. And one guy said, I says, well, what about if you're blind and you're walking down the street and there's a scooter across the sidewalk? He said, go around it. Said, but you're blind. He says, use your stick and go around it. Now, he was really being reasonable, because if there's a bicycle had fallen and was blocking the sidewalk, I'm not so inclined to go, let's outlaw bikes or make more rules for bikes or blah, 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 you know.
Well, and a good point with this person who's blind is that human beings are far more resilient and adaptable than we give ourselves credit. I mean, think about, because of COVID, you and I are talking, you know, because we found different ways of communicating. And it's like, man, like, there you go. There's a service of this pandemic, is that it's allowed me to meet so many different wonderful people. And it's
well,
like,
that's really good. You're going to do Simon tomorrow. So let's go onward and upward. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of light, I think. How did I figure this out? Is I saw a little picture and it was saying if a nuclear bomb blew up, you would be toast before you realized the bomb blew up, because of how fast it moved. It's dark, but anyways, but how fast it moves, that your mind wouldn't even be able to, because our ability to think is based on what we're able to see and perceive and think they're from it. So I do believe that the speed of light is faster than the speed of thought, although thought is incredibly fast and subconscious. Like that's what dreams are. It's things that we didn't even realize we perceive that influence what we dream. That's one theory of a dream, of course.
Yeah, that was good. And you used the word perceive. Is perception reality?
Well, you're bringing me back to my philosophy days, the difference between truth and capital T truth. And I think that because the capital T truth is the universal truth, if that is a thing. And so what's perception of reality? I guess it's saying like subjective versus oh goodness, I can't think right now. What's the opposite of
objective?
Yes.
Objective. Yeah.
Is anything truly objective?
Yeah.
I think that reality is influenced by our perceptions.
Yeah. No, that's good. You're answering a lot of questions with the question, and that's what my series is all about: is inventing new questions and new metaphors. So you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. That's the poet Audre Lorde. Yvonne Rainer, another poet, dancer, said you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Conscious consumerism.
Nice. Define what that means.
We all consume. We all have to consume, but being mindful of what it is that we are consuming and realizing its services and disservices.
Yeah.
So for example, like a cell phone, I had, it's interesting is if you have an open mind, you'll live a long time, provided you don't get hit by a scooter. But back to what you're saying, cell phones, right? And I was talking to another client today, and I said, okay, well, they're like, I don't like cell phones. And I said, okay, well, what are the disservices? What are the misuses? I used misuses of cell phones. We listed them all, pornography, attention, all these different things. I said, okay, great. What are the uses? And then listed all the things. And once again, it's like services, disservices. So we attach these values of good, bad, ugly, evil, beautiful, and otherwise to things that maybe just are neutral.
Yeah. Yeah. They want, a real contradiction with McLuhan that he embraced was if the tools are neutral, then, you have to take into account what's called determinism. So they call McLuhan technological determinists sometimes. There's historical determinism, there's gender determinism, there's sensual determinism. So we know that these tools do shape us, but it's again a juggling act. It's back to your word balance. So what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Our ability to listen to each other. I mean, I worry about the future. I worry about, I became an educator because somebody has to look out for children, right? And teenagers and young people in this world. And I realized that when I was a young person, there were some really good people in my life that got me through some really terrifying times. And if I could give that back to, if I could be that same person for other people, then, I would feel a sense of accomplishment. And that is one thing. Now that I'm a parent, I'm usually so exhausted that I'm like, I just fall asleep. But but there are things
No
that
time to worry.
yeah, but there, I am a thinker, right?
Yeah.
And like I said before, thinking can get you in some wild places. But I'm getting better at my ability to, when I go to bed, accepting that there's not really anything that I can do until tomorrow.
Yeah. That's good. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Well, the interesting thing about conjuring memories is that they're affected by everything right now, and therefore kind of speaks into the simulation effect of, what really does happen, what's really real. So
Yeah.
my earliest memory that's kind of I've kept is playing London Bridges Falling Down in preschool, and my father being there and smiling, and me being all like wide-eyed and like, what's going on? That's probably my earliest memory.
That's beautiful. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It depends what the memory is, but I want to believe that it's more a blessing.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or old ideas?
Did you say afraid?
Yep. That's a great comeback.
Yeah. What define, if you don't mind me asking, define what you mean by afraid. Like
Yeah.
not wanting to hear the idea?
Well, it's great because usually I answer questions like yours by what people have said to me. They go, "I'm not afraid of ideas," but some people do say, "No, I'm more afraid of old ideas," or "Oh, I'm more afraid of new ideas," and it's because fear is something that we don't really want to. People don't want to admit fears sometimes. They don't want to say, "Well, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of TikTok taking over the world. I'm just trying to deal with it, but I'm not afraid."
Right.
Fear. So afraid is based in fear. But let me tell you the root of the question. John Cage, great experimental musician, said, "I can't understand why people are frightened of new ideas. I'm frightened of the old ideas." And
Yeah.
then the guy who invented, I think he's the guy who invented windshield wipers, Charles Kettering, he said, "People are very open-minded about new things as long as they're exactly like the old ones."
Right. Yeah.
So it's just this, it's really about this juggling of how new things come in. Did
Mhm.
the second COVID hit, did you go, "I'm gonna go do a podcast," or did it take you a while and you had to come up? I mean, what's the difference of fear is courage. You had to come up with courage and go, "Hey, I can do that." You didn't just go, "Okay, I'm gonna do this. I don't care if I'm gonna be embarrassed or not. In fact, I'm gonna name my show, I'm probably wrong about everything," which is like, well, why should I listen to this guy if he's already wrong about everything?
Yeah.
So tell me, within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family, one person who had an impact on you, one person who's like a role model, and what specifically did you get from them? Just briefly. So inside your immediate family and then outside your immediate family.
My father taught me how to die with courage. He taught me about you can't get through life without hurting people. But if you're not hurting people, then you're probably hurting yourself because you're just doing what everybody wants you to do. And he was not foreign to pissing people off. But I also know that weighed heavy on his, on his heart, that when he let people down. But he taught me that, he taught me how to be courageous before I ever really knew what that was. and to not show fear to people you don't know.
Yeah. How old was he when he passed?
14.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And he taught you a lot in those years. So is now someone outside your immediate family who had an impact on you. And what'd you get from him?
Well, he was my philosophy teacher in high school. His name was Timothy Thornton. And still friends with him to this day. And he taught me that he taught me what it meant. He taught me what masculinity was, because my notions of masculinity were, kind of machismo and rather archaic in nature. Stoic, like, this kind of masculine stoicism of like, everything's fine. I'm fine. You're fine. But I'm just going to drink a 2-6 of, the shittiest liquor I could get to bottle my emotions. Well, he taught me the power and freedom of vulnerability.
Wow, that is a great, Rob, you're very articulate. You should have your own podcast show.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, you're doing good. That was you hear the question, you answer it. So it's fun, And so did your parents raise you a particular religion?
My experiences with religion and faith, because to me, religion and faith are very different aspects of knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
I would say I grew up fearing the consequences of my actions. And so I didn't always tell the truth.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that was, taught. It was an inexplicit lesson that, if I told the truth, I get, when they're like, if you just tell me the truth, I won't get mad. So I tell the truth and it's like, what the fuck? And it's like, whoa. I didn't tell the truth, right? So I'm not going to tell the truth. And so I do remember going to church. I remember I never won anything. Throughout school, except for in Sunday school. I won a shoebox of Jerusalem. And I was like, great, I get a shoebox model of Jerusalem. Yippee-ki-yay, that's my extent of things that I won as a child in terms of like draws and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I just remember Sunday school being boring, not stimulating. I actually wanted to be in the pews with my parents, hearing what they were hearing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I would have liked church if I didn't have to go to Sunday school, because I knew I was getting something different.
Yeah. So do you pray?
That's a good question. I speak to those that have passed, that are no longer, with me here now, but I pray I wouldn't even necessarily call it prayer. I've heard this said before, and I don't know who said it, but prayer is when you talk to God and meditation is when you listen.
Oh, that's good. Prayer.
And I think that's like, oh, like I resonate with that.
Prayer is when you talk to God. Meditation is when you listen to God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was taught another thing that sort of resonates is, like, if you get on an airplane and you go, please God, don't let the plane crash, you're putting in the universe the thought of a plane crash. But if you go, please God, protect this plane with white light, then you're putting in the vibes for positiveness.
Yeah.
So you're not like attracting or manifesting negative. So who knows? Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like with children, like I've learned so much about myself and adults and everything from kids. Like this idea that like, you need to listen to me and all this stuff, like adults are the authorities. There's a very famous child psychologist you might dig. she wrote the book called Childism, and it's the prejudice against children. Her name's Young
Yeah.
Brule. And this idea that, like, you know, you need to listen to me. Why? Because I'm the adult. And it's like, well, why don't you just tell the kid why they need to do this? Because, you know, within reason, not like, well, because you might get, you know, abducted and sold into sex trade or something. It's like, well, you know, no, because it's safe, you know, giving kids reasons, not over their head. Back to what I was saying is that if you see a kid running in the hall, rather than saying, don't run, say, walk in the hall. And they can see in their minds, oh, but if you say don't run, they just see like, all they see is running.
Yeah.
So you have to sometimes lead people, encourage people in what you want them to do versus like, you need to do this, right? I think that it works better.
Yeah, we become what we behold. We become what words we use. So if God exists, what do you want God to say to you after you die?
Isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, there's a really funny story, and it's the foot. Have you heard of the footprints in the sand? And
Tell
it's
me.
like, you know, two people are walking, there's footprints in the sand, and then he notices that there's only one set of footprints, and he's like, where did the other footprints go? And it's God, and he's like, well, it's because I carried you through the sand. But the other story is there's two footprints, and then there's a period where there's only one footprints. And the guy asked God, he's like, why is there only one pair of footprints? And God says, because I was helping other people, you egotistical prick. It's a dumb joke, but anyways, this kind of goes into the individual and the collective. And it's like, I'm so special that God's going to say something, you know, directly to me. Like what words of encouragement could he say? Like, good job. Now, go play the harp. You know, I don't know what words he could
go
say.
Play the harp. Wait,
yeah,
that could be the greatest answer I ever had. Go play the harp.
Yeah. Yeah. God damn it, I need more angels, which would be hilarious if God said, God damn it. You know, God damn it, you're here. Anyways.
Okay. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Wow. Great question. How did you come up with these questions?
Well, I will answer that question. I've collected questions for 35, 40 years.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
I'm your protege. Well,
dude, I want you to take it over. I mean, I have a list of 150, but you know, I have an audio tape of me asking my dad about his dreams or
that's
something.
what I wish I could do, man.
Yeah, it's probably when I'm 8-ish, so it's 60 years I've been asking questions, but I started literally collecting them when I started. Two of the questions are coming up. I'll tell you them. When I started reading Christine McKenna's questionnaires with all my heroes, Captain Beefheart and David Lynch, and I was like, these are great. And she says, it's so cool to interview people because you like get to go in their house and meet them. And, you know, it's like, wow, I'll try this. And then, you know, I've been trying to find a protege, believe me, for years. So go for it. And I'll give you the script. I mean, it's basically a script, you know, it's 150 questions. I usually in 90 minutes go through 50 of them approximately. So it's just a juggling act. You can feel, you know, which one you want to pull out from the old. So that one, I don't know where that sounds like a Christine McKenna question. And I've interviewed her twice with her own questions, by the way. But yeah. So do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
You know, like that is obviously a timeless question. And this does boil down to nurture and nature. And I think that nature will always be nasty, brutish, and short, in the words of Thomas Hobbes. I mean, that's like, people are like, I want to get out in nature and see flowers. It's like, did you see the video of the cougar trying to eat that guy? Like, that's nature, right? You know, so there's nurture and there's nature. Nature can be cruel, right? And we need to respect it. But nurture is where we can make that's where we can make people, to hopefully encourage them to make better choices that benefit humanity. And I think that there are not evil people. I think that there's hurt people. Yeah. I think that Hitler, let's just use Hitler. Oh. Hitler was a hurt person.
Yeah.
And if he would have been shown love when he was a young person, I do believe that there would be things would have been different.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. I mean, you think about Donald Trump, right? That guy did not experience love as a child. Look at him.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, sorry, that is a value statement, but I'm going to say it.
No, it's an observation, and we know, that. So this question follows up with that, and it's, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? So once your daughter comes home, she's 12 years old, and she says, somebody's beating me up, they're my enemy, whatever. But before you answer, I'm going to set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts said, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The question is, how do you, Rob, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react to the Alan Watts thought? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, it depends what you mean by what Alan Watts meant by acknowledgement. Is that like, oh, I'm so crushed by them? Or is it like, okay, well, I'm going to prove you wrong, right? Yeah. It depends kind of what the acknowledgement is. I mean, my father said, don't let anybody live rent-free in your head. But these are all wonderful aphorisms that I don't know if, when you're in the thick of it, it's pretty difficult to apply, right?
Yeah.
At least for myself, because I can get pretty worked up. I think that I love this example of the Bay of Pigs, the invasion in Cuba, and how, they put together this think tank of people, and they're like, yeah, we're going to invade Cuba. It's going to be great. And apparently when they were in this room, so the story goes, they were just agreeing with all of their ideas. Like, that's a great idea, guys. I love it. This is great. And we all know how the Bay of Pigs went. It was disastrous. And so I do think that conflict can actually be a great teacher. It can make us better. I really do believe that. Now, that said, there's another saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So I'll give you an example of the earliest conflict that I had that I can kind of recall, a significant one. There was, so my elementary schools, it was divided between primary and the intermediate grades. So grade kindergarten to 3 and 4 to 7. And I was in grade 1 or 2, and I was walking home, and I had these silly sunglasses on my head, and I thought I was the dopest kid ever. And I was walking home, and this grade 7 kid said, nice sunglasses, asshole. And I was like, what? Like, I thought these were cool. Anyways, I kept walking. So the next day I conspired. I said to all my grade 1 friends, I said, hey, let's all walk home to my house. Some guy, he's being a bully. And they're like, yeah. So I got a posse of about 8 kids, and we're walking home. And I said, there he is. We beat the piss out of that kid and threw him in a ditch. Wow. And then the next day, I go to school, and the principal's like, Robert Grant, down to the office, please. And I was like, oh, great. They found me. And I walked down there, and there was this grade 7 boy. And he's like, that's the guy who did it. And then I'll never forget, I walked up to him and I said, you're lying. You started it, in front of the principal. And I was a pretty passive kid, but something just ignited a flame within me. I said, you're lying. And the kid was like, whoa. And I'm like, you started it. And the principal was like, holy, Rob, calm down. Right. Cause I was like coy.
Right.
And then I went home, and my mom was like, how could you do this? Like, you started a gang. And my dad was like, sweet, good job. And then after that scenario, I it wasn't until after I graduated high school that I ever resolved conflicts with any mild form of violence. And for me, it's like the last, like it's a form of protection. But I'll never forget. And that was then that I learned, okay, so maybe you shouldn't beat people up to solve your
Right.
problems.
Even though your dad sort of gave you the nod right on.
Oh yeah. And my mom was like, she was pissed. She was like, Gerry, because that's my dad's name. She's like, Gerry, you
Yeah,
can't tell him to do that, right? So
that's
anyways.
great. So,
So yeah.
if how would you tell, your daughter comes home at 12, what would you say to her?
Okay.
I
So
mean, not that situation, but how
yeah.
she establishes somebody's her enemy. How are you going to say, how do you deal with it, honey?
I think it would depend. Let's put it this way. If there was a conflict and somebody said like a zero tolerance thing, like let's just say in grades kindergarten to grade 3, something like a racial slur,
Yeah.
something like something really
Yeah.
faux pas, obviously, I would say, you know what? Punch him in the face next time he says that. And then when you go down to the principal's office, you tell them why, and that will start the conversation. Now, I got this idea from a CBC radio podcast or show, and it was this family moved somewhere up north, and they were the only Black family in this community. And the father told the son, if somebody ever calls you a racial slur, you punch them in the face. And when you go to the principal's office, you explain why. And then that will start the conversation. And I
Wow.
thought, And then in high school, that's when things do become different. And I think that it's situational awareness
Yeah.
and identifying whose words matter, right? Kind of going back to that kid who had the insecurity about his weight, it's like if you identify what your insecurities are, it's we try to snowplow for our kids, right? Like, oh, no problems here. The thing is that kids can be cruel because they're just small versions of ourselves. They're human beings, right? And yeah, so
That
I
was
think
good. Yeah.
there's conversation, but there's conflict is a good thing.
Yeah.
In my world.
So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? William Faulkner years later said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Rob, why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, here I'm doing the little reverse Socratic method, but there's a saying that, what is it? Art imitates life or life imitates art.
Yeah.
And again, there's that marriage there. I mean, rare is it films that I watch that aren't trying to say something. I mean, I think that's one thing that I've known about you, that you believe that film is a way of expressing things and making it a more accessible medium. So your question is, why do we watch films?
Well, it's basically, why do we have to recreate anything in literature, in poems, in any form? Why do we have to recreate things?
Okay, so
Yeah, it's not just film, but it's in any form. Why do we have to recreate things to get them? We think we have to recreate them. Yeah.
I think it's twofold. I mean, art for the creator is like, your hope is that you're creating something that will last. And I think maybe that's it, is that in us is a desire to create.
Yeah. What do you think the motive of the cave artist was?
it's almost like a deus ex machina, right? Like this is the first image. And then from there, we've just continued to advance it until the point is that we prefer the depictions of something versus it in nature. So again, it's almost like I'm answering it with a thought, but
Well, that's what we want. Yeah,
yeah,
feeling and thought are in. You can't separate them, but it's more what we're pursuing is hunch or intuition. But you know, I get so many answers for that. And is it different? Like people who are making films now or art is a different motivation than it was for the cave artists, whatever
yeah,
they were doing. Is it really changed?
maybe that cave artist was paid. Maybe it was like, hey, I want you to draw me a buffalo hunt so I can explain to my kids how to do the hunt. And I will commission you for it. I'll give you, a bunch of buffalo or whatever it was that they were drawing in it. I do think that there's.
Yeah, I've never had that answer. That's amazing because people don't think of that as applying that to the history of art is the artists we know are the ones who are paid by the church and the government to do portraits of them. There's a lot of art we've never seen, I mean, that's the beauty of this medium you're working in. It used to be Dick Cavett and Johnny Carson and, a couple other people.
Elitist.
Studs Terkel, who's a guy you should study. Studs Terkel did thousands of interviews in Chicago, and he's one of the best. But they all rose to the top and were doing it. Now there's a gazillion people, and anybody can do it, and all the power to them. Uh, so, what first attracted you to pursuing, like if I'm at a party, I say, Rob, what do you do? What do you say you do? What do you say at a party? They're trying to sort of insinuate what do you do, meaning how do you make your living?
Well, I do work as a counselor.
Okay, so
And
let's go with that. Counselor.
okay.
Where did you first go? You have some sense you were sent to the counselor, but when you had that fight, but when did you go, oh, I could do that? Like sort of walk me through did you go to college not knowing, or did you right off the bat knowing, like what point in your life did you go, I could do that? And what caused you to say I could do that?
Well, I originally began as a teacher, and it was with that person, the non-family member
Tim
Thornton, who had a really deep impact on me. He was a teacher, and I said, oh man, I want to do this. Right. So I started doing that, and then I realized I really do enjoy teaching, but I came to the conclusion that kids didn't need me to teach them math. They needed somebody who wanted to make a connection with them, that liked them. And I thought, well, I've always gotten along with kids because I'm just look at me, I'm just a giant child. And, I say that with I'm proud of it, right? Like there's something in kids, their level of wonder and kind of like asking why. And I think that that's awesome because they want to understand. And at some point in our lives, it's like we think we know everything, so we stop trying to understand. Or because of the cognitive dissonance is so exhausting that they're like, oh, I don't let's just go on here. And I don't like that. Like I love learning new things. And when I speak to kids or adults, families, I am learning something.
Yeah.
And I just think that, this ability that people have trust in me, that they can kind of open up, and that it's back and forth. It's reciprocal. I mean, I could never see myself in an office job. Never. I could never be a business person either. I would love to make, my money doing something like this, right? having these conversations. But if you told me like, Rob, I want you to be a used car salesperson, I'd be like, where's the nearest bridge? I have to jump off it. Right.
But Rob, there was a key word you said. I came to that conclusion. So Tim led you to belief that teaching could be a cool pursuit. He inspired you to see that vision. But then what led you to, then you said, then I came to the conclusion that I wanted to be a counselor and not so much just a teacher. What kicked you over?
I think it was gradual. It was so many of the things that's required of teachers are amazing individuals. I mean, anybody that wants to spend their life trying to, this is idealistic, of course. I mean, there's a lot of people that become teachers and they're like, sweet, summer off. Anyways, but the ideal is that people become teachers because they want to encourage the future. They want to work with the future, right? And there are so many requirements of teachers that are just like, kind of almost like corporate. Like education is, I'm very worried about the future of education. There's a lot
You
of
mean like red tape and bureaucracy?
Yeah, and that's bullshit. I hate
But
that stuff.
don't you have that as a counselor too?
Yes, you do, but you can make it work to your advantage a little bit more. I mean, like for example, when I'm writing notes, those are confidential notes. Nobody's going to see that. Versus a report card, like here you go. So it's more manageable. It's more manageable, but it's also what it is everything about counseling when I'm working with kids is about connection and, learning the kids versus like, okay, I have to teach you math, but I don't know math. You know what I mean? Like math was never my strong suit, but talking to people has been, and trying to understand people has been. And that's what counseling is. And when I was a grade 5, 6, 7 teacher, and in this classroom was 14 children and 12 boys, 2 girls, and about 8 of them were all in the foster care system. And I realized then, I was like, these kids don't get, well, I need to reach these kids before I can teach these kids. I know it's a cliche, but it's a good one. It's like, you need to reach people before you can teach them, right? Like if I'm just going to sit here and tell you, okay, Gerry, this is the way that it is. But if we have a connection, it's easier for us to back and forth information and knowledge. And it was with that classroom that I realized, okay, this is not what kids like this need. They need somebody who cares about them, who likes them. I'm not saying I'm necessarily their friend, right? But I'm interested in them. And I think for a lot of kids, just based on how busy life is that it's difficult for their parents or for adults and things like that to be these people in their lives. And that's what I needed as a kid. So by giving that back, I'm getting something out of it.
So how many years have you been how many years did you teach, and then how many years you been a counselor?
I was a teacher for about 4 years. I still do teach occasionally. Like if I'm at school and there's like, oh, we need somebody to teach. I'm like, hey, put me in.
Yeah.
Right. And then for a counselor, I've been about the same amount of time.
Really?
4 years. Yeah.
Tell me one element of counseling in the 4 years that stayed the same and one element that's changed. Sort of like what you've learned in the 4 years, but your approach, you get the question. One element, and you can define what element means in 4 years, one element that stayed the same and one element that's changed.
Well, I think that there's more awareness and education around diversity, inclusion, culture, these pieces, and how they're inseparable in their influence on individuals. And of course, I knew that before, but I'm understanding it even better now, and understanding my place in it, in the sense of my experiences that led me to where I am are different than anybody else's experiences. that have led them to where they are.
Yeah.
And being cognizant of that. So when I say, why can't you just figure it out, which I don't do, but I need to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. That's good. Now that's what's stayed the same or changed?
I would say that what's stayed the same is the importance of relationships. What's changed is how they're developed and cultivated moving forward.
Your methods and sense of how you do the conversation.
Yeah. Only everything has changed. You know what I mean? Like the more things, it's almost like that old adage, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, it is a matter of perception.
Yep. What's more important? In general, I know it's both, but what's more important, conviction or compromise?
I think the consensus is important. And I think consensus is the marriage of the two of those.
Yeah.
Because if you're convinced, but nobody else is, that's the birth of tyranny. But if you just constantly compromise, that's also, there's a road to doom there. So as difficult as it is, consensus, right? And I think that that's the key to all long relationships, right? I mean, think about marriage, right? If I'm just going to constantly compromise, well, there's that will end in consequences. And if I'm just like, we're just doing it my way, well, I don't think I'm going to have a very happy partner now, will I?
Yeah. That's funny because that's the question I started with. So once I learned that question from Christine McKenna, I'd go anywhere, a party or on the beach, and I'd say, hey, what's more important, conviction or compromise? My 2 favorite answers, just so you know, is these 10-year-old kids go, those words are too big for us. But it took 25 years before this guy said, depends on what you mean by important. So he took the emphasis of the questions, conviction or compromise, and he says, no, I'm going to emphasize the word important. So here was the second question I learned from her, but I changed it. So I'm going to ask you the way I originally asked it from Christine was, is ambition based more on fear or joy? And I usually couch it with this: your observations of humans is ambition. Not so much you, but your observations. Is ambition more based on fear or more based on joy?
Another really good question. I mean, obviously very different, right? I mean, joy is like, I love doing this.
Yeah.
But fear is also like, if I don't do this, what are the consequences?
Yeah.
And I do think that fear, I say fear.
Yeah, most people said fear. So then I changed it because of this Hollywood director saying something. I said it this way: of these 3 elements, tell me how you rate them in your success. You've got a wife, you got a kid, you got a job, luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest part, second and third part?
I always think of it as fate, chance, and choice.
Yeah.
Fate is like, here we are. You're born at the right time. Chance is like, well, you're at the right place, smaller. And then choice is what you decide to do in that moment.
Yeah.
So that's how I would rate them, is that.
No, that was good because that's William Friedkin, who made The Exorcist. He said, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition. So, I like when people reword my question. That helps me.
I will say nowadays, I mean, depending on who you ask, there is, previously you needed talent. Like it was talent, something that you really, you fought to develop and hone. And nowadays it's like, TikTok, it's like anybody who's wearing something really revealing or whatever, they have a chance to sort of make it or whatever. But I really do think that to sustain success, you do have to have effort, ambition. You have to have those skills, right? Was it Andy Warhol who said, well, in the future, we all get our 15 minutes of fame?
Yeah.
Right. But, that's only 15 minutes.
Yeah. So Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. Another guy you might want to check into. He's like, if you break your back, you're going to go study Moshe Feldenkrais because they're going to try to treat you with normal. He's a really great sort of philosopher. I don't want to say healer, but he said it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're taught to overcome weakness. Tell me a weakness that you've incorporated to become a strength.
My sensitivity.
So how you were overly sensitive, and then how did that become a strength?
My ability to talk to people.
Yeah.
To just, and to share my own pains and hurts. I mean, yeah, I was way too sensitive. Well, there's a value statement there. But anyways, I was a very sensitive kid. And but yeah, I'm a counselor, right?
Right.
Obviously, I realized that I agree with that statement that your weakness can become your greatest strength. It's just like your sensitivities, right? Your insecurities. Yeah. If you really look within yourself, you can actually find the answers.
Yep. You can turn a breakdown into a breakthrough, into a redirection, but it does take courage, and it takes a little deep thinking and discussion and, meditating on it. And like McLuhan's line is, carefully make plans, then do the opposite. Think, I got the perfect plan here, and then just flip it for some reason to see what's going to happen. Yeah.
What you said is turning your breakdowns into breakthroughs is essentially what people like Tony Robbins have based their entire careers off of.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just that paradigm, that sort of perspective of your failure. That's your moment. Like, stop saying you're losing, you're learning.
Yeah.
Right? Good. Give me 1 second here too.
Sure. So we're online with Rob Grant. He's doing these shows. I'm probably wrong about everything for a while, and I hope you'll tune in and see more of Rob's shows. Simon Prentice, who worked with Paul McCartney and Stanley Kubrick, is going to be talking about his book entitled Speech. And this is a deep study into language, where it came from, how it shaped our behavior. I'm so glad that Rob hooked up with Simon. I just gave a plug for your show and Simon, so you don't have to edit it out. Hopefully people will tune in to hear Simon, and that's going to be a great show. I appreciate you doing that. So
have you read his book yet?
No, I haven't read it, but I've talked to him, and I hope to read it. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I saw the 9-minute video, which is very good. Yeah. Okay, Rob, why is it so difficult for humans to consider the possibility that life may be pointless? I'm not saying life is pointless. I'm saying, why is it hard for humans to consider that possibly it is pointless?
Well, because it's just like, well, then what? It's almost like the whole Ayn Rand thing. It's like, well, then have you ever seen that movie Burn After Reading by those brothers, the Coen brothers? Yeah, that's it. The Coen brothers.
Oh, Burn
After Reading.
No, that's not the Coen brothers. It's someone else. But Burn Up, it's something I was going to actually talk to you about for a second. you got ESP because Tony Robbins, go back for a second.
Okay.
Tony Robbins came out of Venice Beach as a fat kid on the boardwalk, learned neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Have you ever studied NLP? You should
No.
look it up. You'll look it up some other time. Neuro-linguistic programming. And that's rooted in a great book you should seek out, which is Walter Boart's book called Operation Mind Control, which is really one of the first groundmaking books on all that sort of art of persuasion, in what Tony Robbins. Now,
Oh, you mean Goebbels?
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it covers. I mean, it goes back way before, but I mean, this was sort of like pop paperbacks coming out and talking about. It's sort of like pre-self-help.
Yeah.
Before the self-help movement, Operation Mind Control is deep into political, but also understanding what Scientology is, what cults are, what religion is, how people do what's called social engineering. Well, everything that the FBI and CIA and secret police in England learned from studying Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. MK
They got that from Finnegan's
well,
Wake?
It helped them. Believe me.
I still have to do that Finnegan's Wake night thing. I mean, that's
well, yeah, you can do it we do it through Sweeney's Pharmacy every Tuesday at 11 a.m. for an hour and a half. We do it and then every month on first Tuesdays we do it in Venice. So there's 52 Finnegan's Wake reading clubs across the world. So you can start. The easiest is start one on your own. But now I hijack that. Burning after reading. You were going to say, why did you bring that book up? I mean, that movie up.
Well, it's because the whole movie, you think that there's going to be a point to it. And then at the end, the joke is like, so you're trying to tell us this whole thing was this one massive clusterfuck?
Yeah.
And it's like, like here they thought that there was some conspiracy, the inside. Like, really, we think that there's like, these some conspiracy theories. It's like just say it's lizardmen. You know what I mean? Like, just say it, right? Because that's kind of what you're pointing to, that all these things are so constructed, when really I just think we're connecting the dots. And sometimes you could still finish the picture of, connect the numbers or whatever. Even if you mess up a number, the picture, I don't know if you've ever done that, but the picture looks kind of messed up, but you still sort of see it. Yeah. Right. Anyways, the way the mind works is it loves routines, repetition, patterns.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, think about how massive the universe is.
Yeah.
Surely, even if it does all just boil down to chance, then this probably has happened before. The probability is just there.
Yeah.
So
there's one thing I'd be a little careful with this.
Sure.
You understand that conspiracy theory probably was put together by the CIA to discount research into Kennedy's assassination. So then they could kookify political research. So if you take the bigger picture and say, I'm a political researcher, and here's how I've studied these patterns, and here's what I deduct. Bay of Pigs is a good example. Gulf of Tonkin it's a fake thing that the government uses. That's evident. Gulf of Tonkin is for real. But you could say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
So then what happened was, over the last 20, 30 years, conspiracy theory has been kookified. So anything you say conspiracy theory, that means it's kooky. You just change the words and say, well, I'm a political researcher. Then you tell somebody something, they go, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. So it's way words are manipulated to change. Fake news used to be satire news. It changed. The Wikipedia changed their meaning of it because it used to be satire news. And then the word fake, due to McLuhan's deep research in etymology, knows, it's pretty simple actually, that the word fake comes from Latin for fact, which means to make. So faking is making something. So yeah, it's a fact and it's making. So, if you're making something, does that mean it's not real?
Well,
Well,
yeah.
so it can the words we have to keep in mind that words meanings change and words evoke more than their meaning. If you say certain words, you evoke more than the meaning. So, T.S. Eliot said it best, the poet. When I talk to you, I got to use words. And so words don't always work, but we are so indoctrinating to think words work that we go along with them. So
It
let's
just
just
sounds,
yeah, but no,
right?
they're not just sounds. They do carry baggage to help us communicate, but they also have disservices. Most people wouldn't say there's disservices to words. If you said, what's the services of a cell phone? Blah, blah, blah. What's the disservice? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, what's the disservice of words? Most people
Hmm.
go, well, they're too engulfed. It's same with cars, same with most things.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Most
It's just
things
part of their thing.
we
They
don't,
never thought.
what's the disservice of clothing? We don't think clothing has disservices. Someone invented clothing and convinced us all we have to have them. Chairs. One of my friends came to my group for years and he finally read this article that chairs aren't good for us to sit in. Now, me and you are sitting in chairs. We brainwashed ourselves to believe that this is more comfortable than if we were sitting without a chair. But it's like proven by, some science that chairs aren't good for us. So, but I'm not going to change, and you're not
Yeah.
going to change. We like the soft, comfortable chair thing.
And it
So
would
it,
look weird if I was standing up. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it's just that again, we mutate also. We adapt to what we self brainwash ourselves to believe that these tools are better than without the tool. So I'm not trying to convince you to not wear clothes, or because if you didn't wear clothes walking down the street, they would arrest you. Like, who made
yeah.
that rule up? That's a human being. Why do you have to have clothes on? Well, no, we made a rule. You have to have clothes on. It's like, what? I was born without clothes. Isn't that pure? Who's to say?
Well, that's like I forget the name of it, but it's like, is it morality laws, or certain people they were charged
They
with, like,
legislate morality. Yeah. They want to
yeah.
legislate. Yeah. Well, it's the whole thing about laws and rules. But let's go on. We're doing you're doing super cool. Let's do this one. Um, Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Anger could be a productive emotion when, well, that's a good one. It also depends what that anger is,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's destructive anger and there's constructive anger. Again, that's a hasty sort of, I'm oversimplifying here, but I think survival is another bit. That's a great question. I mean,
Yeah. Well, here's another how my question changed. I used to say, can anger be a productive emotion? And my friend taught me, he says, no, don't, because that's easy. You just say yes or no.
mhm.
And when I put it into that form, it's forcing them to give me some sort of formula. Anger can be a productive emotion. What was the last person when it's turned into information? I thought, oh, that's a good answer. And one person answered after I changed it. I said, anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank. He says, anger can't be a productive emotion. So he sensed the way I worded the question previously. And I thought that was brilliant. Okay. How do you find peace of mind, Rob?
Stillness.
Nice. It's a great word. How do you acquire stillness?
For me, there's so much like I've consumed since I've started this, the amount of reading that I do, I've had to get glasses. And there's been moments when I'm like, oh my, like there's so much information that I'm taking in.
Yeah.
And the wheels are like, it's like the hamsters on the wheel, and it's like starting to smoke. That's the image that I get. And it really helps when, no cell phones, no sounds. I sit quiet and still in the dark or whatever after my daughter's gone to bed, because, she'll come and, kind of thing. Anyways, sit still for 30 minutes. That's how I do it. Eyes closed and just focusing on this part of my face.
Yeah.
And just breathing. And it's something that was, I'll tell you where it was borrowed from. I'll pull from my pretentious bookshelf.
Yeah.
This guy right here, who I interviewed, Bruno Cayun.
Very good.
And he came up with this theory of mindfulness integrated cognitive behavioral therapy.
Nice.
So, wonderful.
Bruno's last name again?
Cayoun. Bruno Cayun.
Very good. So that's really good. Do you do yoga? Have you tried yoga?
I've done yoga. I mean,
yeah.
Another very important part of our lives is yes, nutrition, of course, as we talked about on last Wednesday, but also movement and staying active.
Yeah, it's really important. So if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I like you.
That is good. On what occasion do you lie?
Well, lying is, as I was mentioning before, it's always something that I've kind of worked on. And on what occasion do I lie? I think that I dance a lot with the truth.
Nice.
Right? If I'm going to be blunt, it's like, oh my God, right? Like that's, in today's society, we cannot shirk from the truth. We do have to be honest, because like I said before, through conflict comes change.
Yeah.
But it's how you do it. Are you being respectful? Right? Are you being considerate?
Yeah.
And I think that for me, I'm not, I do pull punches, but I do it in a way that's quite entertaining because people know exactly what I'm doing.
Wow.
But I'm able to kind of work it in like working with parents. I mean, it is not my place to tell somebody how to raise their children. However, what I'm seeing is that there does need to be some adjustments in the environment that this person is in.
Louis Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. Any comment?
So here, you're kind of going back to that. If I'm going to be completely blunt, and I said this to somebody the other day, if I'm going to be completely blunt, like if I'm going to swing my axe, I better be ready to get an axe in the back of my head. And one thing that kind of is a pet peeve of mine is people who can say it, but they can't take it.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a limitation there, that if you're going to spitfire your truth, you best be ready to have that truth spitfired back at you. Yeah. And again, I just don't think that makes for a nice waltz through life. Yeah. So if I'm going to sort of ask my questions, and I think the title encapsulates it all, right? I'm going to speak my truth, but I know that that's a lowercase truth. Yeah. I'm probably not right. So please educate me. I'm seeking to understand.
Yeah. It's really good. Yeah, because it's also based on flaneur or psychogeography, where the guys in the people in the 20s in Paris were changing the world with their art and music. And they were basically just sitting at coffee houses doing nothing. And so the cliche is the journey is more important than the destination. And they were like, why do you even have to have a destination? Why do you have to name something? Just wander aimlessly and you might stumble onto something. Joyce really nailed it. He said epiphanies and everydayness. We can have epiphanies. You don't have to read all those books. You know, you can, and they can help, but you can just be walking down the street with your daughter and have an epiphany, you know, and it doesn't, they can come from anywhere. It's not necessarily you have to have a goal or a destination name.
I agree with that, but I also think that our society, there's so much pressure and influence to know your destination. Like, when I was a kid, it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a movie actor. Why? Because I think it's cool when James Bond runs away from explosions. And it's like, well, if you actually are on movie sets, it's I don't think it's nearly as fun as the end product. Harrison Ford, apparently, get this, apparently he's never watched any of his films.
That's great.
But could you imagine if you're at a party? Do you know who Kenny Chesney is?
Yes.
Love that guy. Could you? He does strike me as the guy who's like, hey, listen to this song. And it's just him playing his music all night long. I'd be like, what the fuck? Versus somebody who's like, yeah, I want to hear your music. So it's like, do you consume your own art? Yeah. Anyways, that's a complete tangent.
It's good. It's good points. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll? Over or
well, if it's going under, you're a savage human being. There's something wrong with you. Over.
Yeah. If a publisher was to release your autobiography, Rob, just off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Oh, you know what it would be. I'm probably wrong about everything.
Oh, that's good. Now, they want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell would it be?
For the book?
Yeah, you open up the book and you'd
only rich mahogany and cigars and scotch. No, if they were to scent it, it would be probably something like that, just as a joke, because I always joke about being pretentious.
It's like the man's club smell. You get into the man's room.
Yeah, and I love musical. Like, I'm not a very masculine person, like I don't know anything about sports, right?
Yeah.
Which apparently is a mark of masculinity. People are like, "Oh, you watch the game?" I'm like,
"Yeah."
Which one?
Right. Which one? Yeah, but you got to go along with it. I was the same way, because I said there's a bar in every corner so that the government can pull the wool over your eyes and feed you beer. And you get in there and they're just not talking about the sports. They're talking about politics. So, it is organized sports is like anything, organized religion. You can find all these disservices, but sports brings people together.
100%.
Yeah. I played catch football for 30 years with homeless people on the boardwalk to stay to stay active.
Yeah.
And so it's weird because people are always like, well, did you watch this team or that? And I sort of always just go, well, I don't really follow organized sports, but then I'll just say, who were the 3 football players who had the biggest impact on you? And then they'll tell me why somebody had an impact on them. So if a statue was built in your honor, Rob, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
I would want it in the Vatican, in the front of the Vatican, made of shit.
That is good.
Yeah. Okay. No, I would never want a statue.
I know, but you answered the question. That's what I love. People fight it sometimes. They go, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And so if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Say thank you.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Tell me something I've never had and I never want.
Well, first of all, it's good. You never had it, but you never want it.
So something that's good that I've never had. but
but you never want it. It's good. You never had it, but you also never want it.
I am thinking here. A mansion.
Right. That's good. Yeah. And here's 5 questions by Alan Watts, just off the top of your head, 3 to 5 words, Who started it all?
For me?
You put them in the context you want. Yeah.
Okay. My parents.
Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
In its rightful place.
Who's cleaning it up?
We will.
Is it serious?
It could be the greatest joke.
That is a great answer. So, closing out now, we can continue some other time, but I just got a couple more. I want to thank you, Rob. This has been truly enlightening, and I appreciate your time and all your efforts. So,
thank you.
This is Thornton Wilder wrote an important play called Our Town. In 1928, he said that art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. So it's a cute phrase and it's deep, but you've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not implying you haven't answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
I think for me, it's to come together while we still have time, to leave this place better than the way that we found it, to realize that, like, as cheesy as it sounds, but love and kindness really is the answer, and just understanding, right? That we have to, if we seek to understand, if we try to listen to each other, if we question things, we have a better chance of getting it right. I think a problem that we have is we put a huge pressure on ourselves to have the answers. That I think we're better off just asking the questions and living with a sense of wonder. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living."
Yeah.
And that's words that have carried me, throughout my life since I've heard them.
Good. What gives you the most optimism?
My daughter.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah,
100%. Okay, Rob, that's a good point to stop. At this point, we'll continue our discussions in many ways, and I really appreciate this.
Thank you. I appreciate it too. It's different being on this side of the questions. All right. Thank you.
Later, dude.